Did you know that a homeless man from Serbia once converted to Islam and then saved the Ottoman Empire from the Russians? You see, in 1806, the Balkans were mostly under the control of the Ottoman Empire, reaching as far north as Serbia and Bosnia. At the time, the Austrian Empire was the main rival of the Ottomans in Europe, and they controlled the lands of modern-day Croatia, forming a border with the Ottomans. And at the time, a lieutenant governor named Peter ruled over a small town near the Ottoman border along with his son, Mikhailo. However, things would take a turn for the worse for the two when Peter was caught stealing from a military safe and forced into retirement. Mikhailo soon realized that his career in the military would forever be stained by his father's crime. So in 1823, he decided to take a risk and flee from the Austrian army, starting a new life instead in the Ottoman Empire. For the next 5 years, Mikhailo wandered from place to place in Ottoman-held Bosnia, doing odd jobs and struggling to make a living. But at some point in his journey, he befriended a Turkish merchant who convinced him to become a Muslim and even offered him a job as a tutor for his children. Mikhailo accepted this idea and converted to Islam, changing his name to Omar. He now had a stable job and a new name, and becoming a Muslim made it so much easier for him to integrate into Ottoman society, and soon he would have his big break when the Turkish family he was tutoring for decided to move to the capital city of the empire. When Omar arrived in Istanbul, he began networking with the military institutions of the city, taking advantage of people's curiosity when they learned that he was a Muslim convert and a deserter of the Austrian army. Within a short period of time, he managed to land a job as a lecturer at the main military academy in the city. And with some further networking, he soon became the personal assistant of a high-ranking officer. He was now involved in reorganizing and modernizing the army, which gave him great insight into Ottoman society. During that time, he managed to meet and marry a rich heiress who was the daughter of another high-ranking governor. And soon after that, he was given access to the royal chambers themselves, becoming the teacher to the Ottoman heir, Abdülmecid I, would later on become the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. By 1839, Omar was appointed to the position of military governor of Istanbul, and he was now given the prestigious title of Pasha. Within only 11 years, he had gone from being a wandering vagabond to now being one of the most important people in the capital city of the empire. But it was clear by now that the Ottoman Empire was no longer the great power that it used to be. For a while now, there had been widespread inefficiency and incompetence in the central government, and this led to its weakening over time. Various provinces within the empire began to gain more autonomy and move in their own directions, and the central government often responded with heavy-handed suppression, pushing these provinces into full rebellion, only to then send people like Omar to put them down. And at the same time, corruption in the central government had caused the empire to fall behind other European nations in terms of technological advancements and military innovations. No longer were the Ottomans the most advanced superpower in the region, and in the eyes of other European superpowers, the Ottoman Empire was now the sick man of Europe. In 1853, the Russians decided to take advantage of this, and they invaded the Ottoman Empire from the north, capturing modern-day Romania in the process. In response, Omar took control of the Ottoman army, and using his extensive knowledge of the land, he managed to halt the Russian advance, hitting them with heavy artillery fire and forcing them to retreat beyond the Danube River. Again and again, Omar and his army managed to stop the Russians from crossing the river, defeating them each time, until one day, under the cover of fog, the Russians managed to take the Ottomans by surprise. They began besieging them in a small city called Silistria, and the Ottoman Empire, being only a third of the size of the Russian one, had only enough supplies to last them for 3 months. It was a desperate situation, and even though their supplies were dwindling, they continued the fight, never losing hope. The Russians, on the other hand, began to face their own problems after about 2 months in the siege. Disease had spread throughout their camp, and their supplies too were running low. And seeing that their attacks on the city had little to no effect, the Russians were forced to abandon the siege and once again retreated to the north side of the river. Against all odds, the Ottomans were once again victorious, and eventually Omar Pasha was able to retake Romania. The Ottoman Empire then began a new offensive, trying to take the Crimean Peninsula and cripple the Russian navy. Omar Pasha was once again sent to the front lines and immediately got to work. He first managed to take and hold the port city of Eupatoria, giving him control of the western coast of Crimea. In response, the Russians began a counteroffensive to retake the city, but Omar and his men were well prepared for this. They fortified their positions and placed their artillery in strategic locations, knowing exactly where the Russians would come from. And when the Russians finally launched their counterattack, the Ottomans fired their shells, inflicting heavy losses on the Russians. The Russians continued to advance under heavy fire, closing in on the city and trying to use ladders to scale the walls, but Omar had been prepared for that too. He had had his men dig ditches around the walls and fill them with water. The Russian troops under constant fire could not set up the ladders while also dealing with the makeshift moat. Scaling the walls of the city would now be impossible. Once again, the Russians were forced into a retreat. Soon after, the Russians would lose the war. Omar Pasha was then later promoted to Field Marshal, the highest rank in the military, and eventually even being made Minister of War in 1869, cementing his legacy forever as one of the Ottoman Empire's greatest military leaders. And sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if Omar's father hadn't been caught stealing from that military safe all those years ago? Perhaps Omar would have stayed Mikhailo and would never have become the great Ottoman hero he turned out to be. Like it, follow for more Muslim facts.